right, good evening and welcome to the August 12th, 2021 meeting of the Master Plan Advisory Committee. This is the 11th meeting of the Master Plan Advisory Committee, and the committee voted to have this be a in-person and online hybrid meeting. As such, we do have some members joining us remotely, and we also have some members here in Town Hall. We are broadcasting on Westborough TV, Verizon 28, and or Charter 192, or live streamed at Westborough TV. And anybody who's not in attendance wishing to submit questions or comments, please send those to planning@town.westborough.ma.us, and please include in the subject line your name and address in Westborough. Emails from tonight's meeting will be answered after the meeting. So we are gathered at what will likely be the last gathering of the Master Plan Advisory Committee. So we are approaching the end of the process, and what we are gathered tonight to do is to review at a high level the entire master plan. We're not going to read the entire 251 pages, but Donnie from VHB will take us through the plan. And the intention tonight is to get the approval of the advisory committee members present to agree in principle that this is a document in a form sufficiently complete to take to the public for final comment, and additionally to present it to the, after the input from a public comment and from a public hearing, to the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board at a joint meeting on September 21st. So once we've reviewed tonight, what we'll be essentially agreeing on is that we give permission to VHB to publish this, subject to the incorporation of any comments that the committee members want to make up through Monday the 16th. Is that correct, Donnie?
Yes.
And that will commence the opening of a public review period in which the document will be published to the website from August 23rd to September 9th. There will be a public hearing, in-person public hearing, I believe. Jim, is that correct?
That's correct.
That's the intention?
In-person public hearing.
On September 9th, and then the goal will be to present the plan for adoption by the Planning Board at a joint Select Board Planning Board meeting on September 21st. The ultimate intention then is to present the adopted plan by way of information to town meeting in October. So we stand to review the document. I will admit that I haven't read all 251 pages. I'm about 144 in. And I must say, personally, I'm very pleased with what we have created. And I think you should all be proud of what we have created. If the only thing I get out of the master plan is an expanded vocabulary that includes the Bloody Bluff Fault, Eskers, Moraines, Erratics, and Freetown Muck, it will have been worth the time invested. But it is much more than a wonderful unveiling of the richness of Westborough. And I think what we have created here is a document that reflects the lived experience overlaid on this traditionally technical document that is required by the state, in a way that reflects the core values of our community. And I think it provides a very clear message and roadmap to and from our elected, appointed volunteers and town officials, as well as to our department heads and town employees, as to how the residents of Westborough wish to see their town evolve. So I think the incorporation of non-traditional sections in the document, the public health section and the sustainability section, have added a new depth and dimension to master planning. And additionally, the cross-departmental thought and care that has gone into all of the other more traditional chapters reflects a healthy respect among members of the community and departments for how their work relates to and reflects on others. So I'm very pleased with what I have read and seen so far, and I will turn it over to Donnie to take us through the plan so that we can get further comments from all of you.
Could I just make one comment, Lester?
Yes, Hazel.
All right, I would just like to thank all the members of the advisory committee and all the members of the town who contributed to this master plan. This is what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a compilation of comments and ideas and thoughts from the entire community. So I really like to thank everyone, and I want to particularly thank Donnie for all the work he has done on behalf of VHB to get this ready for us.
Well said, Hazel, and thank you. Yes, the process was interrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and yet we persevered. And in persevering, we were able to get extraordinary contribution from across the community, and we're very grateful for all of that input. So thank you for that, Hazel. Any other comments before I turn it over to Donnie? Anyone online? Jim, any hands raised?
I see no hands raised.
Okay, and no one in the room. All right, Donnie, over to you.
Thank you, Lester and Hazel. I do want to just reiterate and echo one thing that, Lester, you said about commending...
Donnie, sorry, could you pull your microphone right in front of your mouth so we get
Here we
good...
go.
Thank you.
Is that better? All right. I hear it myself. I want to echo what Lester said about commending the MPAC. If you recall, we started this process back in November of 2019. So this is a almost 2-year process, typically longer than the traditional typical master plan process, but we were interrupted, as Lester did say, and we persevered and we pushed through in spite of the challenges that COVID presented. So commending the MPAC for staying with the process and continuing to participate in the process. So thank you very much for that. So what I'm going to do now is just present the full draft of the comprehensive plan. I'll go page by page, but I'll just give you the highlights of what's included. And I'll show you what has been included since the original submission to the MPAC some weeks ago. And a big part of those additions are the graphic elements that you'll see throughout. So beginning with the cover, you'll see that the cover is very vibrant, has a lot of photographs, demonstrates a lot of activity that takes place in Westborough with Arts in Common, some retail activity, some landmarks that are present in the community, some students with a bit of humor attached to their graduation, the farmers market, and I believe that's Lake Chauncey on the right-hand side there. There will be a table of contents that will be added later, and we did request that Lester and/or Christy Williams provide a letter, just sort of teeing up the full master plan prior to getting into the body of the document. I did add an acknowledgments page, which thanks once more the MPAC, along with specific call-outs to Jim, Kristen, the administrative assistant within the planning department, Hazel and Lester as well, and the community at large. So on each side of on the left-hand side of each of the intro pages to each of the elements, there's a big, bright photograph. Westborough TV was very kind and gave us access to their photo library, and we picked and chose some of the better ones that represented the elements that we're speaking to in this master plan. So here you see the entering Westborough sign and its incorporation date of 1717. This is the introduction. Each of the individual chapters, again, that first page has a header that's very graphically oriented, and has a underlying picture that represents the element itself. Here we're talking about introduction, planning process, and community vision, and we do have a picture of the first public visioning meeting that we did hold way back in the beginning of the process. You do see a lot of people in the same room, something you don't normally see these days, but it was quite the event, and we did get a lot of participation. So chapter 1, it begins with an introduction. What is a master plan? What is this master plan about? We go into the planning process, and we highlight all of the different steps in the different phases that we organize the document and the process by. So beginning with Westborough Reflects, we identified the community's issues and opportunities. Following Reflects is Explores, where we set the shared vision and supporting goals based upon the outcomes of that initial meeting along with the initial survey. We developed and prioritized supporting actions. We created an accountable implementation program, and we pulled it all together for review and adoption under the Westborough Confirms phase. That is followed by the full listing of the MPAC members, calling out special attention to the chair and co-chair. And then we get into the public engagement, and I just wanted to stop here for a moment, because over a 2-year process, we can forget all of the great things that we did do. And as Lester and Hazel alluded to, there was a lot of external engagement, and there was a lot of internal engagement. External, with the public and the community at large, and internal with town departments, their staff, the committees, the boards, et cetera. So I'll begin, and our public engagement process began with the formation of the MPAC. It continued with the community tour and this targeted stakeholder interviews that VHB conducted. We had one in-person public forum, which I mentioned. We had another economic development roundtable, which not everybody participated in, but Lester, you participated in, I believe, along with some members of the town staff. But really, we wanted to get members of the business community in the same room representing different aspects of the economy, so real estate agents, property developers, large business owners, small business owners, just to discuss what the current state of Westborough's economy is and where it should be going, what the challenges are. One virtual public forum that focused on exploring the goals. If you recall, we had those breakout sessions. Here is a big image of the handout that we provided to the MPAC at the beginning of the process so that we can afford you the opportunity to share what the master plan was about. Here's an example of the public-facing invitations to the public forum, and just representative of the fact that almost half of the process was conducted virtually, just a snapshot of the Zoom session. I tried to get everybody to look as best as they could, but hopefully you're pleased by what you see here. It does show a good, my intent here was to show more members of the public than the MPAC, but this is representative of the virtual environment. We also had one student-focused survey, so thank you, Viggy, for that. We will be attaching that as Appendix A, along with the other community surveys, so the first community survey and the second community survey, which focused on the recommended actions and their prioritization. And we did get some very good participation despite the length of that survey, over 150 participants. We had various community conversations throughout, so I do recall, for example, we held the breakfast with the police chief, and I believe, Jim, you were part of that. And way back in 2019, we did have a table and some photographs of that event here at the 2019 holiday stroll. We will be having one public hearing, and that will be held on September 9th. And we did, in closing out the whole engagement process, we did have a project-dedicated interactive website where we had robust idea submissions pages and a storytelling page as well. And then Lester, you held interviews, and I believe Jim, you did as well with Westborough TV, and Westborough Connects did support us in advertising all of these events and the happenings of the master plan. So thank you, Westborough Connects. And we have a few more images of the virtual environment, the website, as well as Lester's interview and some of the MPAC meetings that were held virtually. And Chapter 1 does conclude with a vision statement. So it has been a while since we've seen this vision statement, but it is broken up into Westborough wanting to be a balanced community, a connected community, a desirable community, thriving, multimodal, sustainable, and trusted. That last bit reflecting the 2018 strategic plan. So I'll go a little bit quicker here. I wanted to highlight Chapter 1 because it is an important chapter that outlines the process, including engagement, as well as putting a fine point on the whole document with the vision statement. But continuing into Chapter 2, land use and development patterns, like I said before, and consistent with Chapter 1, we do have a bright, bold image on the left-hand side with a graphically oriented header just depicting what chapter the reader is about to read. So each of the baseline or elemental or topic chapters, however you would like to refer to them, it begin with a brief introduction about what the element is about and how it relates to Westborough. We then continue to the planning context, where we primarily draw from the 2003 master plan, which was the last master plan approved and adopted by the community, and the 2018 strategic plan, which is really internally focused but was recently completed and does have a lot of relevant thoughts and ideas and recommendations. Other elements within this chapter may have other references underneath the planning context. For example, the Open Space and Recreation chapter, Chapter 6, does reference the 2018 OSRP, the Open Space and Recreation Plan. So getting into the baseline conditions, I'll go pretty quickly over this. Hopefully you did read most of it, but it does just break down the element into its different aspects. So for example, land use and development patterns, we're talking about land use compositions. You do see the breakdown of land uses in Westborough, and I do have that highlighted because we did make some adjustments to the land use map recently based on some Chapter 61 corrections, which I'll get to in just a moment. Each of the chapters has, again, robust, large images that reflect the topic at hand, or a relevant, resource that's mentioned within the body of the document. Here we're talking about land use patterns, and you do see, I believe this is Route 9 and 495, if I'm not mistaken. I think this is the Olympus building in the background, but it does show some of the commercial developments that have erupted or developed over recent years in Westborough that has made the economy so strong. We continue with vacant lands and development potential, where we break out the available lands that are in Westborough. This is followed by some high-resolution maps that depict the land use classification in 2005 and juxtapose it against that classification in 2019. What wasn't included in the original baseline analysis was the build-out analysis. So we did take that vacant lands use database, and we did break that down. We applied some environmental constraints, and we came up with some numbers that determined, how much new commercial square footage, commercial employees, industrial, residential development the town can anticipate under existing conditions, again, under the constraints of environmental limitations, such as the presence of wetlands and associated buffers, flood hazard areas, etc. So this is the image and the illustration of the build-out analysis. So you do see that there were pockets. Here's Boston Hill to the left-hand side to the west. Many areas within the community are available for development, but they are distributed, and they are, compared to the total land area of the town, Westborough is becoming and on its way to being built out. So this chapter continues with some development patterns, just highlighting some areas that are notable: the Route 9 corridor, the 135 corridor, the Libby Conservation Area, Cedar Swamp. Here's an image of the townhouses at Westborough Village, TOD development. Following zoning and long-term development patterns, we do break down zoning in the community, and we do break down that zoning and describe their purpose, the purpose of each district. Here's an illustration of that zoning map. And then each topic-based chapter concludes with an issues and opportunities section. This is the issues and opportunities that were identified by the MPAC in the middle of the planning process. They're not copied word for word, but they are presented in a very similar tense, in a very similar presentation, and comparing element to element, if there was similar ideas on what an issue was or an opportunity was for the community. For example, moving toward adopting CPA, then similar language was used in each of the individual chapters. And likewise, each topic-based chapter does conclude with the goals and recommendations that we approved as part of the implementation plan on the 26th of July. And this is the presentation of those goals and actions. So that is the land use element. And before we stop for discussion and comments and questions, I do want to just go through the entire document. And I do know that you'll be hearing my voice for a little bit of time, so bear with me. But I want you to see the entire document. Chapter 3 is housing. Again, we do have an introduction. We go over the planning context. For housing, we do look at demographics, population. Something new for this particular iteration of the draft is race and ethnicity. We do look at the diversity index. Esri does provide an algorithm, a methodology to determine a diversity index between 0 and 100. Westborough falls at 56. And, that's compared to, I think, the state's diversity of, Westborough is 53.5, not too far from the state's index rating of 56. Now, that 0 to 100 rating, 0 represents no diversity, and 100 represents complete diversity, meaning if you pick any two people at random, they will be of different races, ethnicities. Households, we do look at household data as well, and I just want to point out again, and as I mentioned in one of my emails, we did update all of the ACS data, that's the American Community Survey data, from the 2013-2017 five-year estimates to the 2015-2019 estimates where it was appropriate. So I won't go into too much of it, but you do see some large graphics, charts, tables. We do look at the housing stock. Again, some big graphics there representing some residential development in the community. We do look at housing values and costs. So one of the big takeaways is housing values has increased across the board, but more so in Westborough, and more so impacting renters than owners. Relatedly, we do look at cost burden and report on that. Property taxes, affordable housing, the SHI inventory of affordable housing, which is Chapter 40B. We did add, based on recommendation of the subcommittee, the housing subcommittee for the MPAC, sections on workforce housing and senior housing. And again, we conclude with some issues and opportunities. And some of the issues for housing, needing additional multifamily housing or finding additional sources for funding, taking advantage of the new Affordable Housing Trust. Opportunities being tax incentives for developers, additional tax incentives allowing seniors to stay in place. There are some, but it was felt by the community that they don't go far enough. And again, goals and recommendations that were approved as part of the implementation plan. Following that, economic development. We do look at the regional context, just putting the Westborough economy into the context of the Worcester County and its smaller region. Employment and industry, we do break that down. The distribution of businesses and the allocation of employees by businesses is represented in this map. Again, we did update the data as much as possible. Development opportunities, we do reflect the desire to have a more vibrant downtown. We also reference the proposed downtown village planning overlay district, which we plan to include as an appendix, Appendix B. That particular document outlined several facilities that are underutilized or could use some rehabilitation to provide some economic value. There were some edits to the development opportunities. 1400 West Park Drive has been developed, or is permitted rather, and then 4400 Computer Drive is the Amazon Fulfillment Center. So that's being removed from the document, and in coordination with Jim Robbins, we're going to be adding one more facility. And Jim, did you just want to mention that?
West Meadow Plaza.
Thank you. Boston Hill is another opportunity that I believe is in the permitting stages, perhaps. Stagecoach Plaza as well. And here in the Economic Development chapter, we do just want to just call attention to the groups that are supporting economic development within the community, so the EDC. One of the additions to this iteration of the draft is we did add recent successes of these groups throughout the document, in particular in the Public Facilities and Services section. But the EDC as well does have some recent successes that we did want to highlight, and this is the general format of those call-out boxes. You also have the 495 Metro West Partnership, state incentives that are provided, as well as incentives from the town. So issues and opportunities that were identified by the MPAC, vacancies at Bay State Commons, need for greater affordability in housing and housing choice, so there is that intersection between housing and economic development and its impact on the economy. Downtown Westborough not currently being a destination, expanding public services where necessary to support commercial and industrial activity. Some opportunities, leveraging the town's family-friendly reputation, creating some new connectivity, paralleling East Main Street with, or paralleling East Main Street and mitigating traffic issues. And of course, the Rotary being a traffic issue as well. Developing bike trails, hosting more events, making more connections between economic-oriented community groups, and revisiting local bylaws. So we're harmonizing commercial opportunities with the character preservation and environmental sustainability of the community. And again, the goals and recommendations we approved as part of the implementation plan. Next is the natural resources, but I do want to stop here. We do have the photograph of, provided by Hazel, of some of her cows. A very lovely photograph indeed.
Love it. Much better.
So this is a rather long chapter, so I'll briefly go over its inclusions, but this is another chapter where we reference the ORP heavily because it is a recently released document, and it does go into a lot of environmental context that's relevant for a master plan. So with natural resources, we look at geology, soils, and topography, things that are going to be impacting development, things that are critical or significant resources to the community from a natural standpoint. Above in figure 5-1, you do see the prime and statewide importance farmland soils. We look at landscape. We break down the land cover types within the community, and that differs from actual land uses. So land uses are the types of activity, and land cover is the type of, what's currently, sitting on top of that land, whether it's developed land or it's natural land, and what are the breakdowns of that natural land. Figure 5-2 just shows the difference between land cover in 2004 and 2016. You don't see much change. You have to look pretty closely, but you do see some development along the commuter rail line, some residential development notably, and you do see some additional development along Route 9. We look at water resources that are important to the community, rivers and streams, the Sudbury River, the Jack Straw Brook, the Assabet River in particular, reference protection standards such as the surface water quality standards, ponds and lakes, other types of water bodies. We do look at the Assabet River Reservoir, the Westborough Reservoir as well, which is also the Sandra Pond, make mention of the Great Pond, which is St. Lake Chauncey, and we do go into some description of those resources. Additionally, aquifer recharge areas and wetlands that are important to the community as well, and you do see a view of Mill Pond here in that picture. We look at the dams that are present, whether they're publicly owned or privately owned, and we look at the hazard code that's tied to them, whether or not they present a hazard to neighboring lands or not. Some significant and one high hazard dam is present within the community. This data is a little bit dated. The Mass DOT's dam data is a bit old, and it has been updated in quite some time. So, Jim, perhaps we can just double check this to see if any new work has been performed at some of these dams since then. Forest and vegetation, wildlife and fisheries, both important resources for the community, and both represented in Figure 5.3 and 5.4 respectively. 5.4 looks at the Biomap 2 resources, which is broken out into core habitat and critical natural landscapes, and you do see a high concentration of those resources within the Cedar Swamp area and up by Lake Chauncey. We do highlight the known threats to natural resources, so some of the hazardous materials and the waste sites and landfills that are present within the community. There are no landfills that are currently active in Westborough. I just want to point that out. Erosion and sedimentation control, a recent bylaw, a stormwater management and erosion control bylaw, was passed, I believe, during the process of this master plan, if not soon before. Chronic flooding and hazard mitigation. So in sustainability and climate change, we do go into in depth some of those issues. Development impact does have some adverse impacts to natural resources. We look at invasive species as well, and then and that concludes the natural resources section. Historic and cultural resources, we do give a nice graphic of the history of Westborough on the left-hand side here. We identify the records and inventory of the Massachusetts Historical Commission relevant to Westborough. Westborough does have several national and state registry listings that are presented here in bulleted format. We give an overview of the inventory patterns and by period and by style. And we made some modifications based on Jen Doherty's comments. So Jen, if you're watching, those comments have been incorporated. Just noting that the architectural style can be deceiving based on some potential rehab that was not properly documented. Resource types, archaeological investigations. We do have some historical imagery that we pulled from Digital Commonwealth as well. And then we get into the historic and cultural entities and events that support the historic and cultural activities within Westborough, and the Historical Commission being one of them. The Cultural Council, Arts in Common, which is a very popular activity. You see that same image on the cover replicated here in this chapter. The Public Library, we make mention of that as well. The Public Library held a Westborough, Your Town, Your History, and these are event, and these are some of the images from that. The Center of History and Culture, Historical Society, and we do have an image from Gary Kessler there, so thank you, Gary, for that one. And Westborough TV, so all of these entities do have a role and influence historic and cultural resources and programs within the community. We highlight the protections, lastly. The demolition delay bylaw is basically the only regulation that protects buildings in Westborough from being demolished. Some zoning bylaws, some design review, and some site plans also support the preservation of historic resources within the community. And the chapter concludes with issues and opportunities, and just sort of identifying some of them here, the declining biodiversity, limited policies and procedures for managing town-owned space, pest control policies, potentially having some environmental impact as well, opportunities, stewardship planning, before conducting some of that for the town-owned spaces, performing public outreach and education, and studying the use and redevelopment of Hockamonga Pond, and supported by the reuse committee there. And the chapter concludes with some goals and recommendations. We do have this lovely picture of the Westborough Golf Course. I think that's fantastic. Next chapter is open space and recreation. Again, relying heavily on the OSRP, the Open Space and Recreation Plan. We also reference the State Hospital Reuse Plan and the Statewide Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan. So the baseline conditions analysis is broken up into the open space aspects and the recreation aspects. So for open space, we do give a breakdown of the protected and unprotected lands within the community. We did manage to include acreage for the Dupree property and the Zwicker and the 140R South Street properties. But you do see here from this table about 69.7% of land with that is classified as open space is protected, with the remaining 30.3% being unprotected. And there are some priorities that were identified within the OSRP, including St. Luke's Cemetery and the Lane property. And here in Figure 6-1, this does go over the open space lands within the community by level of protection and their primary purpose. What I did add to this is the agricultural preservation restrictions, which does prevent development that is an in perpetuity restriction on the property, and that's primarily Hazel's family's properties along North Street. We do mention the Open Space Partners, the Conservation Commission, the Preservation Committee, the Open Space Preservation Committee, that is, and the Community Land Trust as well. And then this recreation subsection does just list the recreational assets that the community has, whether they're indoor or outdoor, primarily outdoor. We do also reference the recreational opportunities that the community would like to see, including a dog park, and we do mention the potential boat launch at Lake Chauncey. And here are some images of some of the recreational assets of the community, including the playground at Bay State Commons and the field at Westborough High School. And there are many committees that support recreation in the community, and there are several regional opportunities to enhance recreation in the community, including the BWALT. Some of the issues and opportunities, there's not any indoor recreational space. There's no community center. There's an open space fund that requires regular and stable source of funding. Some trails are incomplete. Some opportunities, passive recreational opportunities at Hockomock Pond, completing the charm bracelet, and improving the maintenance of some of the facilities that the community does currently have. And the chapter concludes with some goals and recommendations. Moving along, here's a picture of Westborough Town Hall, which represents the Public Facilities and Services section. So this is a rather long section. It goes into some of the needs and an assessment of some of the departments of the town. That does include the town administration. And again, as I mentioned before, we do highlight some of the recent successes of all of these different groups. One question that I did have, it was previously stated that there was going to be a procurement officer, and maybe we could follow up after about whether or not that was actually included in the fiscal year 2022 budget.
Yes.
The Department of Public Works and its many divisions and the good work that it does, and many of the different plans that it draws from to plan its work moving into the future. And we do highlight all of the infrastructure of public works, so 100 plus miles of roadways, 42 miles of sidewalks, 5 bridges, lots of water infrastructure, sewer as well, public spaces and buildings that they take care of, including the 4 town cemeteries, equipment and properties, fleet equipment, like 70 plus vehicles and 2 fuel tanks. Quite the inventory for the Public Works Department. The fire department is highlighted as well in the good work it does, along with the police department, located adjacent to the Forbes building, the school department as well. So Amber, where I pulled the recent successes from was from the 22 budget. If you do have some recent successes you would like to share that we can incorporate into the plan, more than happy to include them. We highlight the good work that the Council on Aging is doing at the Senior Center. And there's a picture of the Senior Center, along with the Conservation Department, the Board of Health, Youth and Family Services, and we do highlight the one new addition is I think it's the Wellness newsletter, if I'm not mistaken. We do highlight that either in this chapter or the Public Health chapter. I'm not quite certain, but we do mention that in this chapter in association with the school department. The Public Library and its plan for renovations and expansion. It is currently number 1 on the waiting list. And finally, the Recreation Department. We conclude with some issues and opportunities, talking about additional water resources that are required, critical infrastructure that's aging, the comprehensive wastewater management plan that's been referenced previously in this planning process that's necessary to support future multifamily developments, opportunities, referencing the 2018 strategic plan and the recommendations from the staffing study as well, and creating potentially a new satellite location for the fire station on the east side of the community. And the chapter concludes with goals and recommended actions. Transportation and circulation. We talk about the transportation network within the community, the roadway network, including bridges and transit networks, MBTA commuter rail as well, the presence of that and the location of the commuter rail station within Westborough, the parking constraints at that facility as well, the previous station that was located downtown that could potentially be a new station in the future. Westborough Shuttle, we did update this chapter to reflect that that shuttle has now ceased operations and was replaced by via WRTA, which is an on-demand app-based service. And here's a map of that service area and some of the key points. The Council on Aging and its transportation shuttle, ride-app services, and finally ride-app services, along with some shared mobility services such as bike shares, which are not currently present. And I believe Zipster, which was operating in the area, did cease its own operations. So that reference to Zagster, was removed. Sidewalk and pedestrian networks is also highlighted. So the community did have a sidewalk assessment recently done as part of its Complete Streets work. I am trying to nail down the data behind this map to give you guys a better, higher resolution map to include in this document. That assessment was performed by Green International affiliates. We talk about bicycle facilities in the community. We reference the MPO plan for bicycles. And this chapter notably was updated with some Complete Streets data. So since the original draft of this document, which is posted on the master plan website currently, the town did advance its work with Complete Streets, and that's the MassDOT Complete Streets funding program. And it has since had an approved policy and now has a priority plan, and we do mention all of the priority projects here in Table 8-3. We highlight the transportation patterns and mode choice, commute mode share, primarily, not a surprise, driving alone, but public transportation is relatively high compared to the rest of the county. Vehicle access, we do want to highlight this from a resiliency perspective as well, as having access to no vehicles and even having access to just one vehicle in the case that vehicle needs maintenance is problematic in case of a disruptive event. We do highlight the travel to work times in this in the figure 8-4, highlight congestion, delay, and traffic calming measures implemented by the town and facing the town, transportation safety, and parking. I did want to highlight the parking study that was recently completed by the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission. So that was completed in November of 2020, and we did update this document to reflect that and the conclusions of that study, and the recommendations as well. Some issues and opportunities, just access to downtown Westborough is limited, and that prohibits some of that destination activity that you're going to be seeking, with a reference back to the economic development chapter. Key nodes of town lack multimodal connections, lack of parking at the MBTA's Westborough station as mentioned. There's a lack of a formal recognized process for developing, programming, funding, and pursuing desired transportation projects. Some of that has been addressed through the Complete Streets program, but continues to exist nonetheless. Lack of communication awareness about public transportation options, so getting everybody on board with increasing that percentage of folks taking public transportation that I previously mentioned, that 4.1%. Opportunities, some state programs are available, like the Complete Streets program, Safe Routes to School, developing specific corridor plans for transportation improvement, and MassDOT does perform some of those. Comprehensive plan and mitigation funds from future development projects to support transportation and traffic mitigation. Advertising the newly instituted via WRTA. And implementing the recommendations of the Westborough parking study in the downtown area. And then the chapter does conclude with some goals and recommended actions. So just two more chapters, topic-based chapters, sustainability and climate change, and thanks goes out to Peter Dunbeck and the Sustainable Westborough Group for helping develop this. A key input of this chapter was the recently adopted climate action plan. So in this chapter, we highlight the work of Sustainable Westborough, and from that, we dig into the greenhouse gas emissions at a community level and at a municipal level. So we do see some big charts, tables, highlighting the distribution of energy usage within the community, the source, and resulting greenhouse gas emissions. We reference the climate action plan and the goals presented in that plan. So Peter, definitely take a look at this and make sure that it's properly represented. We do highlight the green community designation. So the community has been a green community for quite some time now and has had some notable projects and funding made available to them to support reducing their overall energy usage and consumption. Westborough Power Choice, which was previously called Westborough's Community Choice Aggregation, now has higher levels of renewable energy in some of its plans. And speaking of renewable energy, we highlight some of the renewable projects within the community, including the solar that's planned at the Fales Elementary School. We dig into waste management and recycling and give some recycling and diversion rates for the community in comparison to some of the other communities surrounding it. So in 2019, you do see a diversion rate of 21.9% compared to, let's say, 2016, and that was 11.5%. And like I said earlier, we do dig into some climate resilience. The 2017 Hazard Mitigation Plan is characterized and discussed here, as well as the recently completed MVP, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Summary of Findings. So back in October 2020, if everybody's not aware, the community did establish an MVP core team and did have a community resilience building workshop, which identified some top hazards facing the community, along with some strengths and weaknesses, vulnerabilities, related to some of the critical infrastructure within the community in relation to those hazards. So flooding, winter storms, temperatures, high wind, and here's a graphic that describes each of those. And then, again, similar to other chapters, the issues and opportunities that were identified by the MPAC. The activities of Westborough's residents and local businesses do have an impact on climate change, and taking ownership of that, those activities and that impact is going to be a focus of the community moving forward. Having the municipal and private building inventory, updating that so the energy efficiency associated with them is increased. Some of the opportunities, implementing some of the recommendations of the 2021 Westborough CAP, that Climate Action Plan, and promoting tree and landscape plantings are just a couple of the opportunities that were identified. So the last topic-based chapter, and like sustainability and climate change, as Lester mentioned, these two chapters are a bit novel. So they're not statutory chapters. They're not chapters that are mentioned in regulation. They're not required, but they do have emerging importance in the community of Westborough and at large in the region and in the state and even broader than that. What we do go into is, we highlight the aspects of healthy living, looking at active living, making an assessment about walkability and general areas of the community. You could see some pedestrian accommodations downtown, and a boy scootering using multimodal options. Looking at access to open space and recreation opportunities, and here's a picture of the turkey trot. Physical activity for people with disabilities. So I wanted to highlight this because this is something that we did add to the document. I can't remember if it was a request of the committee or not, but I did feel like it was important, given the fact that there are some issues involving disabilities. Later in the chapter, we do address a dementia-friendly community. So we did want to have some consistency throughout the chapter, but accommodating persons with disability, an important aspect of providing services and facilities within any community, going beyond American with Disabilities Act requirements. Along with active living, we look at community health and nutrition, so access to health care. There is a new urgent care center, Convenient MD, along Route 9, that opened up since the initial draft of this chapter. Access to healthy food is always important. We reference heavily the farmers market that's held on a regular basis. We take a look at, in terms of access to healthy food, what percentage of the population is receiving SNAP benefits, so Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program benefits. We look at illness, disease, and prevention, asthma, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, obesity, all indicators of health. Environmental exposures having influence over a person's overall health. So we look at particulate matter, we look at ozone, lifetime cancer risk. All of this is from the environmental justice screen provided by the EPA. We highlight the brownfields in the community, of which there are several. Drinking water quality we discuss. Environmental vectors for disease, so EEE, Lyme disease, of relevance to Westborough. Community cohesion and mental health, increasingly important aspects of addressing personal health and wellness. Looking at social integration and engagement, which was particularly challenging during the COVID era, which we are still in, unfortunately. Taking a look at substance abuse, highlighting opioid-related overdoses. Looking at mental health and social services, where we highlight the good work of Youth and Family Services. And we did add a section on healthy aging, as I mentioned, so referencing the eight domains of livability presented by the WHO, the World Health Organization. And then adding on some elements to address a dementia-friendly community, so transportation, communication, information technology, access, equity and inclusion, social inclusion and participation, civic participation, so aside from having some inclusion within social groups and networks, but having participation in the town decision-making processes, public safety, services, outdoor spaces and buildings and housing, all elements of an age and dementia-friendly community. And lastly, the chapter does conclude with the issues and opportunities, talking about potential improvements to walkability throughout the community, talking about environmental conditions at Lake Chauncey, highlighting the fact that a substantial portion of the town's population is over 60 years of age. So does the town want to proceed with becoming an age and dementia-friendly community? Several communities seek that designation throughout Massachusetts. Westborough has yet to do so. And some other opportunities, including some protective factors within the within the town zoning and other bylaws, and conducting a comprehensive study of Lake Chauncey to determine the sources of nutrient loading. So just a couple of examples there. And the public health chapter does conclude again with some goals and recommendations. Chapter 11 does highlight all of the items that we covered during the July 26th meeting, so that is the full implementation plan. All of the comments and edits that were discussed during the meeting on the 26th have been incorporated. So, for those that are seeing this for the first time, the implementation plan or the implementation matrix presented here, covers all of the goals and their related actions. And for each action identifies the related elements, the leaders who's going to be taking charge of implementing each individual action, the partners that are going to be supporting them in the implementation. So any particular organization, group, or group that can have influence or provide some positive feedback and support. We do identify some order of magnitude cost estimates, so general estimates, $1 sign, $2 signs, $3 signs representing different ranges of cost. Time frame, 1 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, 10 to 15 years, and the planning horizon of this document is 10 to 15 years. So looking out, what is the end game here? We're looking at a 15-year period. And priority rank setting. So the public did have a say as part of survey number 2 and did highlight their preferred priority for each action relative to all other actions within each element. So those priority settings, along with some impact inclusions and feedback, are included here under the priority column. And overall, that is the master plan. That is the full master plan. I did go over it rather quickly, but I hit the highlights, hopefully. Appendix A will be the community surveys and the results of those surveys, and Appendix B, again, will be that proposed downtown village planning overlay district.
Well, thank you, Donnie. So I think that the task before us is to see if there are any comments of critical concern tonight. If not, if there are still some comments and questions, of course, we invite the Master Plan Advisory Committee to submit those with track changes, either using the document posted to the cloud or on a downloaded version of the instrument. I did notice in this review, Donnie, that the comments I sent in yesterday have not yet been incorporated. I don't know whether my link didn't get to you, or
no, it did.
You didn't have time.
I just did not have time.
Okay, just want to make sure
I
that you
did
got
receive
them. I'd also extend a thanks. I know Don Byrne has already given us a couple of critical reads, and I believe that Donnie has done his best to incorporate on your suggestions. I understand there might be a couple more that require some reconciliation, and we'll endeavor to make that happen. Before we throw it out to the committee, I wondered, Jim Robbins, if you wouldn't comment on the state of this master plan, and based on your years of experience in planning and with similar documents. How does this strike you? Are you pleased with it? Are you prepared to have this shown to the public at this point?
Sure, thank you, Lester. So it's a very thorough master plan, and it reads well. And there's a ton of information here, particularly the graphs and the tables, which you have to back up your goals, objectives, and actions. Those sometimes can be laborious, I guess that's a good word, and sometimes I think that we need to add some more photos. I made some comments which Donnie will get. I sent Donnie a couple emails today. There'll be a lot more to follow. The plan itself, though, I think is great. And the fact that we've broken ground with 2 new areas that I have not seen in other master plans, and some of you know I sit on the Massachusetts Association for the Massachusetts Board of Directors for the APA National Group, and we review master plans from other towns every year, and we give an award every year for the best master plan that comes out, hoping that we will submit this in the near future, next year or whenever the next round is. I think that this is a great plan. It's still a draft, and we're going to make comments to it, but in terms of the information compiled here and the unique recommendations made, I think this is a great plan for the town for the next 10 years.
Great, thank you very much. So I'll open it up to the Master Plan Advisory Committee members to comment. I know that we have Jim Ball and Hazel here, at least from the Planning Board. Anyone else from the Planning Board?
Pete Bouchard was online here. Pete is still here.
I do see Pete there too. So I wonder, as members of the Planning Board, this ultimately is your plan to adopt. Might we hear from some or all of you on your feelings about where we are at the moment? Jim, would you like to start? I think you need a mic, so if you don't mind stepping up and lifting a mic up, that would be great.
That works? Yeah, that works.
That works.
Yeah, I agree with Jim's comments. I think it's very thorough, honestly, more than I expected when we began the process. So particularly in the implementation piece. I'm excited about it. It might not be the right word because it's a lot of work, but I think it really gives clear direction as to who's involved and what has to happen, and I think that's going to prove very useful when it actually comes to making this happen. So I've read, like yourself, about halfway through it, and one of my questions is, what will you do, Don? Will you continue to update and send to us as you get comments? How will that process work so we'll know, and, there's a new iterative version of it, continue? What's your intent there?
Yeah, so the document is currently on the OneDrive, and I shared that link so everybody has access to it. I am updating that document as new comments come in. So at some point, close of business on Monday, all comments should get to me from the committee. And before I upload it to the website, sometime around August 19th, I'll give a note to the MPAC, the advisory committee, that I've updated and I've addressed all of the comments that I've received to date.
So we can use that same link.
Yes,
to
yes, to clarify.
As you're updating.
Yes, you can use that same link.
If
Yep.
you continue to access the plan at that link, you'll see all of the changes as they're made and as they're updated. So you can monitor what has been received and what others have commented on in case you have something to reconcile.
Feedback.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Terrific. Great. No, I'm excited. I'm particularly being persistent through this COVID thing is remarkable. It took longer, but, people stuck to it, which is great.
Thank you for those comments, Jim. Maybe we'll go to you, Pete Bouchard.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, no, I'm very pleased with the draft so far. I came in the 7th or 8th inning of this whole process, and I just appreciate everyone on the board and everyone's efforts to make, this. I'm excited for the change and the work that we're going to have to do to accomplish everything that needs to be done. So no, I do appreciate everyone's work, and I approve of what's going on here.
Wonderful, thank you. And we'll bring it back into the room to Hazel for another comment from the planning board.
I think my only comment at this point is that it really gives a good roadmap to the planning board on how to proceed. And I think that for us is going to make a huge difference. And I've been involved, obviously, from the beginning on this. And it's already helped us work on the planning board with some of the things that have been coming up. So that's where it's already begun to do its work, and I know it will continue to do so.
Wonderful, thank you. Jim Robbins.
Yeah, a couple more comments just before, so I don't forget these things. I want to reemphasize what Donnie said. If you have any comments to your chapter or to the plan in general, and I encourage you reading sections outside of your own, as Donnie has in the past, please get those comments if you can, and I urge you to do so to Donnie by Monday, next Monday. It is a long document. Start with your own chapter, then read those that are related to you, particularly those that are in the implementation matrix that assign responsibilities to your area. So thank you for that. Also, secondly, I want to remind people of the schedule. We're going to be having a joint meeting of the Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen to present this, the Select Board, to present this plan to them and get comments formally from the Select Board and have an opportunity for the two boards to discuss the plan and its importance to the town. That will be on September 21st. So please mark your calendar for that. The Planning Board will formally adopt this plan, I'm hoping, in the month of October. We will hit the highlights of the plan at town meeting, at our fall town meeting, explaining the plan to the public. I think that that's a good idea because we've had so many voters, so many people from the community come to our public hearings. Our first public hearing prior to COVID had over 120 people in person. That was great. That was really a great outpouring. And since that time at our last public hearing, which obviously was online, we had over 80. We had 82 people, which is a great participation, particularly during COVID. So I'm really grateful for that. I also want to thank Westborough TV. They provided the images that you saw, these great pictures that are in the master plan, came from Westborough TV and their library of images. That was great. They've also broadcast all of our meetings, including this evening, in making it possible for people to join remotely. Thank you again to Karen Henderson and Aiden at Westborough TV for all the work that they've done to help us out. I will be submitting my comments to Donnie in the next day or so. There are going to be quite a few, so I'm probably going to have to call you as well to explain some of the things, because rather than write a long dissertation, I want to get your feeling on how some of these should be put into the plan.
Sure.
Let's see if I have other things.
Jim, I think the
Yes.
one thing you forgot was the September 9th public hearing.
Thank you, Hazel. I did leave that out.
Yeah, so,
The September 9th will be the next time that we have an open session for the public. The planning board will be hosting that. Thank you, Hazel.
Thank you for that summary, Jim. I'd like to continue to get comments from the Master Plan Advisory Committee, and I think where I'd like to go next is that we made a concerted effort to reach out to the youth of our community, and we have Viggy to thank for that, along with Amber Bach. And I wonder if we'll start with you, Viggy, for your feedback and comments, and then come back into the room to Amber. Any thoughts?
I'm still kind of looking through the document, kind of parsing it a little bit, but definitely the next coming day or two, I'll submit some of my opinions.
Okay, thank you. Amber, any thoughts?
Thank you. I just loved participating in the process, first of all, and the quality of the document really does capture so many important aspects of Westborough. I think that it was unique and special that both Vicki and I got to be into the development of the economic development section, because I think keeping our youth engaged in the community in that downtown area and the vibrance of the walking and the visiting spots, as well as like the open walking space of the many charm bracelet and beautiful open space we have in the community, are just two really large pieces that I think were captured beautifully in the plan that speak to what our youth are asking for in the community, that they can enjoy the vibrant downtown where they are strong economic contributors to the downtown area. And I think I really enjoy that we've got their voice in there. I'd love to continue to emphasize the development of that, the Commons area as really an opportunity for us, and I'm glad we caught it in the document, because I think our students have that walkability and that opportunity to give back into the community. So we look forward to playing our role in implementing the sustainability and health goals. I commend as immensely important to, I think, making Westborough's plan unique, and I think the schools will continue to have an anchor role in that work. So we look forward to helping implement.
Great, thank you. And thank you for that segue. I think there is an extraordinary dimension to this master plan that we have these two chapters on sustainability and climate change and public health. And we have two forward-thinking, prescient people on the committee to thank for that. And that is Jody Hensley for the recommendation and the push to put a public health section in this document, and Pete Dunbeck for doing the same on sustainability and climate change. So I'd like to throw it out to them, and then I'd also go out to Kara for further comment on the public health section on that. But Jody, would you like to make any comments or observations on the plan?
Well, thank you. First, I think I'd just like to say thank you very much. This was a stretch to put a public health section into a master planning process, which is traditionally just looking at the land and the built environment. And now we're taking a closer look at how we live on that land as a community, and the sustainability chapter, how we're going to live healthy and well in the long term. So no, I just really wanted to say thank you, Donnie. You did take the comments that I put forward yesterday. We also combined this. We had a strong input from our senior community. So the public health chapter not only looks at broad and community environmental protective factors and the things we have to think about in living as a healthy community, but also an inclusive community across the entire age spectrum. So there's a strong plan for enjoyable senior living in this community too. I learned some things about, we were very education focused, kind of child focused, family focused community, but we have a significant senior population in town, more than I understood. We have more seniors than we do children under 5. So there were interesting statistics and demographics that were brought to light. So again, I think gratitude and thanks for that deep look at a new lens in community planning. Thanks very much.
Wonderful, thank you, Jody. I also see that Nathan Walsh is with us, so but I'll go to Kara for any comment. Kara, did you have anything you'd like to add? Kara with us on mute, perhaps?
There she is.
Hi. Hi there. I just appreciated being part of this. I appreciate that not only was mental health touched upon, but obviously public health that you just mentioned, and that there were aspects of diversity and inclusion that were threaded throughout this whole process. So I just appreciate all of that. It was, and with that, I was on the housing subcommittee, which we certainly were mindful of those things in that committee too.
Great, thanks very much. And Nathan, another comment at all on the public health piece?
No, I think that the two people that we had, Jody and Kara, did a fabulous job, and I think Donnie really helped pull that together. So I just want to make sure that they get the credit that they deserve, because I think this chapter is looking quite nice.
Great, thanks very much. So let's go then over to Peter, and Peter looks like he's not only joining us remotely but mobily. So.
Well, we just parked the car to get some dinner, so yes. But in regard to the planning process, I thought it was very robust, and I very much appreciated being part of it. I had never really engaged in the master plan previous to this, and I really value the participation level of this committee and the You know, of course, I have a stake in the climate and sustainability section, but I felt everybody in the other groups were responsive to each other, and I thought that collaboration was very good. And that in the sustainability section is really essential. It can't be done in isolation. It needs to be in housing, and the impact on health needs to be considered in land use and so forth. So I think it's really important to have that collaborative engagement model.
Great. Thanks very much. And, you know, each of the sections has been thoroughly built and developed and bolstered by the background baseline information. The transportation section comes to mind, and but all of the sections do. So I think there's just a few people from the advisory committee that we haven't heard from. Jen, Don, John, did any of you want to add anything?
Viggy has his hand raised.
Oh, Viggy has his hand raised. All right, we'll go to Viggy while the others think. Viggy?
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to comment on something that Pete said about collaboration. You know, the whole idea of like, I guess this is just a comment. This is my first kind of experience working with like a town government thing or anything related to civics. And when I kind of came into the process, I expected the subcommittees to be a lot more siloed than they actually were. And especially when I was considering, you know, the youth input, a lot of those pieces were, you couldn't really group them into one particular subcommittee. I just thought it was really interesting how a lot of the points of direction and points that the town can improve on are just spanning multiple committees. And I just want to say that was a really valuable aspect for myself when I was doing the plan. And just to briefly comment, I also wanted to say that I was super happy, and I really enjoyed working with the entire committee. And I'm super happy that the youth also got their say a little bit in the final master plan. So I feel like, you know, I'm happy, I guess.
Well, we're happy too, and it's a pleasure working with you, Viggy, and thank you for those thoughtful and insightful comments. Don Byrne, you've raised your hand. Don, are you muted?
I'm sorry, on the mute.
There you are.
I want, since we brought up the public health, I did want to ask the committee, there's one possible thing that might fit into rec or into public health, and that hasn't been highlighted in the master plan. WCLT is completing what is called an all-persons trail. That will not only be accessible for somebody in a wheelchair, but also for someone who's vision impaired. And it will be completed before the master plan is actually published. So we might want to put a small note of that somewhere in the plan.
Well, I think that's absolutely worthy of inclusion, and I see Donnie's making a note. Who should we reach out to, Don, for a description of where and how and when that is to take place? Are you the contact for that, or should it be someone else at WCLT?
The best person to reach out would be to Keith Martin at WCLT. I can send Donnie his email and phone number for contact.
Perfect. Thank you for that
Thank
suggestion.
you, Don.
Thanks, Don. I don't see any other hands raised. John, Jen, anyone? So if not, I think it's appropriate to leave the last word on public comment to somebody in the room if she would like to make any. And Christine Allen is here with us in Memorial Hall, and I'm sure you all know Christine and the long lifetime of commitment she's made to shaping the character of our community. So love to hear from you, Chris.
Thanks, Lester. I was active on the last master plan. I was a co-chair, and I am totally impressed what you've done with this one. It is so comprehensive and takes in every aspect I can think of that people are curious about. And the future of our town is so important, but to know that people are working on it, they're thinking on it, they're being creative, and they're setting out real goals that we can get our teeth into and make happen is a very exciting thought. And I just want to thank you for all the incredible hours. When you look at the comprehensiveness of this report and how detailed it is and how beautiful it is, you'll know that people have spent so much time and care and compassion in making this report important to shape the future of Westborough. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for those kind words, and coming from you means an awful lot. So, Donnie, what else do we have for tonight? I think we are there, right? I don't hear any concern about this document being put forward as a draft for public consideration.
I do not hear any such concern, but I do want to just make one comment. I'm very pleased to hear all of the positive feedback on the master plan. I want to remind folks that it really does take a committee like this that's been active and participating. We at VHB, myself, we serve as facilitators, translators. We add to things and we identify things that you may not have thought of before. But the more active the committee was, and which it was, the more successful and more comprehensive this plan ultimately became. So thank you to the committee.
Thank you for that. So we come to the end then of our last official gathering as the Master Plan Advisory Committee, except that we have these 3 important dates ahead of us, and perhaps a 4th if we include presentation of the adopted plan to town meeting. Jim has reminded us of those dates, and we would certainly invite all of the Master Plan Advisory Committee members to attend any and all of those dates that they can to lend their support to the presentation of the document. So with that, I thank everybody for attending, both in person and virtually, and the next we'll be in touch through email again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.